All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Radliff. I'm the CyberVets Program Manager here at the Institute for Veterans and Military Family, sitting in this awesome building that's behind me. This is known as the National Veterans Resource Center here at Syracuse University. And welcome everyone to our VetNet today. We got some fantastic guests, subject matter experts from, as I was mentioning earlier, across the military spectrum. So we got our Army, Navy, and Air Force reps, and we got our great partners from the cybercrime organization on the civilian side, doing some of the law enforcement side. So got some great hosts, great guests, again across the spectrum within the cyber and technical field. We got technical, non-technical, managerial. So I'm going to open up with doing a quick introduction. Let everyone introduce themselves. As I said, my name is Brian Radliff. I'm the CyberVets Program Manager. Been here at the Institute for about 3 years now. 31 plus year veteran of the Army myself. I'm more on the non-technical and managerial side, although I got a little bit of IT background from back when I was a kid growing up when I had my Apple IIc my freshman year in college, which is less powerful than probably most of the calculators most of us are using nowadays. But I'm going to, as I said, we're here from the Institute for Veterans Military Family, where our mission is to empower service members, veterans, and their families through actionable research, innovative programs. So many of you have probably participated in either our Arsenal on the entrepreneurial side, or Odo on our training side, or maybe even our America Serves, and through Insightful Analytics, where we've got a great team of researchers here that are out there doing research on the veteran community and those issues that help impact our veteran and our veteran associated community. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce and let each of our guests introduce themselves real quick. I'm going to start with our Cyber Crime Support Network reps, Mr. Bob Berta and Stacy Wright, and then work our way down through a couple of our alumni from our EBV and former Veteran Edge alumni, Josh Soto and Robert Gardner. So why don't we start with Robert and Stacy, and then we'll work our way down through Josh and Romeo, and then we'll get started with some fireside questions. And then we did receive some questions ahead of time that hopefully we can answer, folks, and then we'll end up on the backside with any questions that come up throughout the VetNet. So Bob, I'll start with you and work our way down.
All right, Brian, thank you. Thanks for having me. Welcome, everybody. My name is Bob Berta. I'm currently serving as the interim CEO of the Cybercrime Support Network, which is a nonprofit. We have a very simple and straightforward mission. It's to serve individuals and small businesses that have been impacted by cybercrime. So it's fairly straightforward. We do it a couple of ways. I'll walk through those really quick with you. Fightcybercrime.org. You're going to hear me say that a couple times. At some point, we'll ask you to look at that. When Stacy comes up, I think it's right under background if you want to look at that. That's our website. That's the primary way we help folks. And the idea is if you've been victimized by cybercrime in one way or another and you don't know that much about it, the idea is in a couple clicks, we'll be able to get you resources so that you can recognize, report, and recover from what happened to you. We also have a scamspotter.org website that we've done in partnership with Google. It's designed to be appropriate for seniors, but it's really, it's designed to be easily read and interpreted by seniors, but it's really appropriate for everyone. There's some really good stuff on there. I encourage you to take a look at that as well. We have several programs that we do. We have our peer support program for romance scam survivors. We find that's like a pretty serious problem, and the people that get impacted by that have a lot more than just financial issues with it. They have depression. They're often alienated from their family and such. So this support group that we do, it's with a licensed therapist. It gets them together with people that are in similar situations and gets them reconnected back online, gets them to be able to do that smarter and more confidently, and addresses any issues that they have. The other program I wanted to bring up is our military and veteran program. It's funded by the Craig Newmark Philanthropies and Comcast and sponsored by AT&T. Veterans have a 44% greater loss in cybercrime episodes than just the general population in the US. So we feel it's important. And this program is basically just to leverage or military veteran service organizations in partnership with them to get our information out to them and educate military and veterans. So that's essentially who a little background on myself. Before I came to cybercrime support, I a retired FBI agent. I worked in the FBI for 20 years. And, you know, as I told them when they made me my hiring offer, I said, you know, I didn't work in the cyber division of the FBI, right? They said, yeah, we know. So I worked in the counterterrorism division and the criminal division. So I am not a cyber expert. That's why Stacy's here. So anyways, that's it. Thanks. I look forward to talking to you more.
Thanks, Bob. And to you, Stacy.
Okay, so I am, as Bob just said, the cyber nerd. I am the Vice President of Cyber Resiliency Services here at CSN. Like Bob mentioned, you can see the website in the background. Like Bob, I also come from the FBI. I spent several years there as a cyber intel analyst. And before that, I worked for a 911 center as the IT specialist. Since then, I have also built and run a couple of departments for the Center for Internet Security before Bob and a few other folks coaxed me away from them. So like Bob, I have lots of experience, some of it in the law enforcement realm, most of it in public service, and that's where I'm going to be coming from today.
Great. And on to you, Josh. Josh.
Let's try that again. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking time to listen to me yap about myself. Josh Soto, I'm a EBV and IVMF alum. I think that was, I was trying to do the math on, I think it was like 7 or so years ago. I'm currently at Apple. So my job at Apple is, I act as a bit of a diplomatic liaison between our business markets team, Apple's executive team, so the C-suite there, and the CISOs out in Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. So I spend a lot of time talking to CISOs. I'm certainly not as technical as the two folks that you just heard from, but have a bit of a background in product marketing. So prior to my time at Apple, I've spent quite a bit of time focused on infrastructure and security companies. So doing a lot of things like fundraising, helping companies get started, finding good messaging, positioning, good go-to-market strategies. So I work with a lot of really smart people. I never really claimed to be one, but I get to sort of absorb a lot through osmosis. I had a bit of an interesting journey into where I'm at now. My time in the Army, I was human intelligence. So I worked as, sometimes we call it an interrogator. We did a bit of source operations and a lot of work on the intel side, completely non-technical. And I was able to, through trial and effort and a new baby that needed to eat, I was able to transition away from the intelligence community over to technology. So I'm happy to sort of share any lessons. I know there's probably a few folks on the call that have questions there. I can tell you certainly what not to do on that journey, but super happy to be here. I'm happy to talk about, any cybersecurity trends or, things that we're seeing across different Fortune 100 companies for sure. I get to interview CISOs 2 or 3 times a day and just ask them, what their budget priorities are. What are they planning for? What are their risk assessments? Where do they see the threats? What are their talent gaps and shortages? So it's great. I feel like I've got the best job in the world. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. And on to you, Romeo. Thanks, Josh.
Hey, everyone. My name is Romeo Gardner. I am an Air Force veteran, and I am the president and CEO of a company called Nelos, which is a cybersecurity and cloud company. I spent about 10 years in the Air Force and was working at the White House Communication Agency and was recruited to go over to Microsoft as an engineer. I spent about 9 years there, and I thought, you know what? Let me try this entrepreneur thing out because I think that I might be able to do this on my own. Scary, albeit, and it still is. I don't know if that ever stops, but I'm enjoying the ride. So we've been in business for roughly almost going on 4 years now. We're a Microsoft partner, of course. I went back and partnered with them, learned a few lessons, and I'm also an official ISC squared CISSP instructor. So I teach the CISSP exam at multiple different colleges and different spaces. I'm happy to answer questions about training. That is one of my passions. I love to teach. So I'm just happy to be here and share some things with you all today.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Romeo. Thanks, all of you. All right. So here's going to be the construct for our next. Let me see. We got about 50 minutes left. We're going to start off. We've got 3 questions that we're going to pose to our subject matter experts to provide their insight. As you've heard, they all have great training experience and education and background, and it will bring awesome perspective to our answers. At the second half of the webinar, we're going to answer some of any of the live questions that come in, and we had some of the pre-questions that I've kind of baked into the first 3 questions, and if we don't get to them, we'll get to them in the second half for the last about 10 to 15 minutes for those questions that may come up based off of some of the information that's provided by our subject matter experts. So we'll get started. We're going to start with our first prepared question I had for our SMEs. So the first question that I propose to each of you is, what is the baseline cybersecurity training, education, or experience you would recommend to individuals in order to protect themselves and their families with the current cyber threats that we see today, or that are affecting our society? So well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to mix up the order. So I'm going to go in reverse from how everyone introduced themselves. So I'm going to go Romeo through Josh to start off, and then I'm going to go the other way as we go through to the questions, so we can kind of shake it up. Everybody can think a little bit about based off of the different answers. So that being said, Romeo, can you provide us, some insight on that question?
Sure thing. Sure thing. It's interesting that you ask about that, Brian. That particular question. So I'll probably say maybe about a year ago, and you all may see this also. So you might get text messages from people that you don't know soliciting something. My wife happened to get one, and she just clicked on it to see what it was. And then that let me know, hey, maybe we're not having the conversation in our own home about these things, because I said, you didn't click on that, did you? She said, well, I just had to see what it was. Oh, come on. You do know what we do here. Come on. This is not making us look good. So it is for us, it's a constant conversation. I have 3 children, one that's 20, one that is 16, one that's 15. So for us, it's a constant conversation around not clicking on things that didn't come from someone that you know. In that sense, we also talk about, even if you got something from someone, you may want to call them or text them to say, hey, did you actually send this to me? And did you mean to send this to me before I even click on this? So we go through multiple things, and I try to every day educate them around just best practices that I try to implement. Now, I don't go too far into that, but I just want to make them have a healthy sense of paranoia, right? Some sort of health, not to my height, but a healthy sense of paranoia. So we need to talk about these things that are in the media and that are going on today around protecting themselves. I can't say it's necessarily a baseline. It's more of a constant conversation and reminder around all of the practices that we have in our household. Hopefully that was a concise and short answer. It could go a little bit longer, but I do know we have some other folks, because I want to hear what Josh is going to say too.
All right. Thanks, Romeo. Josh, to you.
I don't know if I'm going to add much to it, to be honest. I would say what's been interesting to me is I get to act as a complete rookie when I talk to a CISO and just ask the questions the way that sort of a layperson would ask them. And I've been able to do that now for a number of years, talking to people who are really heavily invested in protecting super critical infrastructure. So protecting big banks or big insurance companies or technology companies. And what's been fascinating for me to watch over the past 6 or 7 years has been the evolution of what it means to run a security team. So they're responsible for the crown jewels of multi-billion-dollar companies, and the role of a CISO is a chief information security officer. That role has expanded over time, and now what most of them find themselves doing is looking at every part of the organization is part of the security team. So whether you're in HR or you're in the security team or you're the janitorial staff, like you're part of the security apparatus. And when they describe attacks, the attacks are more and more sophisticated. So, and that includes like the call center. It includes, like Romeo just mentioned, text messages, email scams. And it's not always so straightforward. Sometimes you get an email from somebody that is a trusted contact and it is super convincing and they've done their homework on you directly. And so I think the best thing you can do is have that level of skepticism and paranoia. Hopefully it's not disruptive to your life, but to sort of approach all things that are requiring an action, a login, a click, any sort of digital interaction that you're being asked to participate in. Approach it with some level of skepticism. And if you're not sure, ask. Like if you're not sure, hey, did you send me this or whatever, follow up and have that second factor that you're asking about. Because I don't anticipate these things getting easier to decipher. They're getting harder and harder for security teams to sort of tell the difference between what's real and what's malicious. And that only ramps up as we start dealing with like nation states and AI that gets kind of spooky. So I think the best thing you can do is just have like a bit of like digital competency, understand that anything you do online is trackable, is potentially opening some backdoor to a system. And then I work for Apple, so I would be remiss if I didn't say, like, if you work on an iPhone or you work on a MacBook, you have at least some level of protection. But that's it. That's my only pitch for Apple. So, but hopefully that's helpful. In other words, just I would say, be paranoid. I don't know if there's necessarily a training course that I would point anybody to. I think there's a lot of really clever attackers that spend a lot of time on these sorts of things. And if they're committed to getting to know you and attack, my role at Apple invites a lot of these types of attacks. I get them. I had a call just now, like as you handed me this, from an unknown number. So like it happens in my world quite often.
Thank you. And let's go, Stacy.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to kind of play off both Romeo and Josh here. So like Romeo said, this isn't static. This changes constantly. It's a very dynamic field. So rather than doing a baseline training, my best advice is to actually follow the news. Even if you're following regular news websites, follow your local police department, because a lot of police departments issue alerts. You can use the FBI, the FTC, and of course, fight cybercrime. So all these websites have different ways of publishing information about what's going on in the current cyber environment. If it's hitting a news website, then it's probably something you should pay a little attention to. When I worked with state police, my best way of telling them how to do this was give it 6 months. You may not understand what you're reading today, but if you give it time and you keep at it, read the article, go back 2 days later, read it again, you will get a better understanding of what's happened, and you will start to follow the news and understand how the attacks are changing in a way that affects you and your family. To that end, and playing off Josh, you've got training at work. You probably have phishing training at work, and phishing training is one of those things that, yes, I know it's work training, it can be a little boring, but it's probably one of the most important things that you can take. So share what you learn out of that phishing training with your family, because at least that way you're sharing information that your work thinks is important. And so it probably has a higher level of importance across the board. The other thing I'm going to say is mobile device security. So be careful what you download, install antivirus software, do things like think about the request for permission. All that will help you prevent threats from getting onto your devices. And then do things like remove unused apps, use a password or biometrics. I can't stress that one enough. And I'm really sorry, Josh, why you said most you're protected from Apple. Yeah, most Apple devices are very secure. There are the occasional virus, though. It's something I hear a lot. that Apple never gets any viruses. It happens occasionally.
Yeah, I won't say that. Completely agree.
Yeah.
I won't say that.
That's probably good. But you did say most, and absolutely accurate on the most part. So just keep in mind that these are precautions and things you should be doing and paying attention to, regardless of what device you have or how secure you think it may already be.
So I guess I'll jump in right now.
Or Robert. Yep. Bob.
I think in the way I like to, I'm a simple guy, so I think about this stuff pretty simply. And I bring it back to my FBI career, my law enforcement experience. If you live in a neighborhood or an apartment complex and you don't lock your door and all your neighbors do, whose house is getting broken into?
Mhm.
Yours, right? Because they're going to check the locks, yours is open, they're going in. If everybody locks their doors and everybody else has a deadbolt and you don't, whose house are they going into? Yours, right? And you could scale it up from, alarm systems, lightings, dogs, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you got to think about cybersecurity the same way. And by the same token, you could have alarms, dogs, lighting, cameras, deadbolts. And, if somebody wants to get into your house bad enough because there's something in there, they're probably going to get in. It's just going to be way harder and way more difficult. And I think I look at cybersecurity kind of the same way. Now, a lot of the things that I was going to talk about in this area, and there was really just 4 things I was going to say, 4 or 5, and except for 3, they've all been mentioned. So I'll add the other 3, and these are pretty simple. Multi-factor authentication. Wherever you can use it, use it. Passwords are rapidly becoming not secure. And, especially if you use the same password for everything. If you use non-complex passwords, if you don't, you can find passwords on the dark web, in the millions, probably in the tens of millions or hundreds of millions. So 2-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, any place you can use it, you really need to do that. Use a password manager, vary your passwords, use complicated passwords. The next one is just make sure your automatic updates are set, for your operating systems, for your applications on your mobile devices. Just make sure those are set so you don't have to worry about that, because that's how a lot of vulnerabilities get fixed. And it's, if you don't have yours fixed, it's like being the neighbor that doesn't lock his door. That's where they're going. So you can eliminate that by making sure you have automatic updates. And then the last one, and Romeo kind of hit on it, a little bit, is your family. Think about your family too. And especially in the social media context, look at their privacy settings. Not everybody in the world needs to know your birthday with your, year and date and the whole 9 yards. And that's just one example. There's thousands. I remember when my kids first, got a Facebook account, and I was like, okay, but I got to be one of your friends so I can see what's going on. I remember asking them one day at dinner, I said, like, how many friends do you have? I'm thinking they're going to say like, 30 or 40. My youngest said 400, my oldest said 700. And I was like, oh, great. That's not really the small list of people I thought we'd be sharing information with. But, depending on how your thing is set, if it's set beyond friends, it's way, way beyond that. So those are kind of my disorganized thoughts on what you should do for that. But I think if you do those things, you're going to limit it, probably 80% of the problem if you do the things that were described here, like multi-factor authentication, automatic updates, keep your privacy settings and social media online. And, if you trained and work to recognize phishing, that's probably going to take care of about 80% of the problem.
All right, thanks. I'm actually going to spin off a little bit of that question based off of some of the questions that came in from some of our participants. So as we talked earlier, programmatically, we've got our entrepreneurial, our folks that are starting business. So there's a certain skill set that they're going to look at from a business perspective, how to manage, the cyber and the people that work for them. But then there's the individuals that are looking at transitioning into the cyber career field. So we had a questionnaire in the questions asking about, what's the baseline, what's the base way to get into cybersecurity? So what are some of those maybe entry level certifications? And then I'm actually going to throw in the the chat here, one of the resources that I always recommend to folks is called cyberseek.org, which is a great resource, both for those transitioning a career field, where the job market is, what all those job positions are that fall under the niceness framework, and also talks you through some of the different certifications and where, the supply and demand. At the end of the day, the demand just ain't or the correction, the supply just ain't meeting the demand. So, I pulled a report today out of the little over 1 million cyber related jobs in the US right now. We're just short about 597,000 unfilled cyber related positions. So the bottom line is, with the Internet of Things, going up to, they say, I think 35 billion by 2025, every one of those little things that are connected to the internet is a potential vulnerability, which means there's got to be someone out there figuring out ways to help protect it. So if we can go around the horn, let's go backwards. Robert, if you can, anything you can recommend on how to get into the cyber profession, and any certifications or any vignettes you can talk, and we'll work our way back through Stacy, Josh, and Romeo. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I'm gonna answer your question just a little bit differently than you posed it, and I know that Stacy's going to answer your question the way you posed it, so it'll get answered. But what I'd like everyone to consider is, there's tens of thousands of cybersecurity jobs that are non-technical. Frankly, if it weren't for that, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I mean, I think I said early on, when I was interviewing for the job, I remember telling them, I worked at I didn't work in the cyber division of the FBI. And they're like, yeah, we know. So, it works for me. And, I just want you all to consider that. I mean, there's jobs for cybersecurity awareness, there's governance and policy jobs, there's event planner jobs, graphic artists are needed to do this stuff, media relations people. There are all kinds of cybersecurity jobs that are really non-technical. I mean, Josh kind of already spoke about that. So just to, I couldn't agree with him. I'm very much in a similar position as Josh. So I'll stop right there, because I know Stacy can answer the real question you asked, but I wanted to put out that perspective as well.
Perspective, Bob. And Stacy?
All right, so I think there might have actually been a couple of questions in there. I am going to start, obviously we were talking about it in the chat. I love Cyberseek too. That is one of my absolute favorite websites. It is based in large part on the NICE workforce framework for cybersecurity. And I'm throwing that one in the chat right now, which is a website developed by the US government that kind of does the knowledge, skills, and abilities. So you can take the categories of cyber jobs, bring them down to the very technical details of what a singular job actually requires. And then it will give you a career path to get there, tell you certifications, tell you like a specific skill you need. And to Bob's point, this includes skills that are non-technical. So you might need a skill that involves being able to talk to people. I can tell you from personal experience running an operations center that we could hire somebody who is incredibly technical all day long, but if they couldn't answer the phone and talk to people, that was a real problem. So there are soft skills and hard skills that will hold you in very good stead. The other thing that I just want to point out is make sure you have the basics down. Whatever certification you're looking for, whichever direction you want to go with this, make sure that you can start with the basics. You understand how a network works. You understand how a computer works and what we mean when we actually talk bits and bytes and registry keys and all that. Because regardless of what job you pick, having that information that lets you even participate in the conversation makes a huge difference. And there's a wide range of certifications out there. Some of them have been mentioned in the chat already. They will get you there. There is also the federal virtual training environment that is free to all US government employees, federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial, as well as all veterans. So in theory, everybody on this call actually qualifies. You can get access to the free training, which will help save you some money, but get you through to getting those certifications so you can list them and hopefully get a job.
Cool. What she said. Yeah, so I think I guess I'm going to start out by giving maybe some unsolicited career advice more generally, and it's to do what you naturally love to do. Find a way to do what you naturally love to do. And like Bob said, there's so many available careers around cybersecurity. What I see from my vantage point is that the cybersecurity budgets are only increasing, and the demand is only getting higher. The threats are only getting more severe. The complexity of applications is only getting more fragmented. And you know, we've got IoT, and you've got this like remote work. There's all of these sort of driving forces making cybersecurity a bigger risk surface with more specialties needed in different places. So there's a job for you in cybersecurity, I guess, is sort of the net of it. And I early in my career, I made a transition from human intelligence, which is a non-technical field, into graphic design, because I naturally sort of am drawn towards like design and animation. And so I got my undergrad in animation, and it turned out that paid the bills, just not quite well enough. And so I wanted to shift over into something that was cooler. And so I wanted to do something cool. So I decided I was going to go pursue cybersecurity. And I ended up getting like a networking CCNP certification. And it turned out I hated networking. But there were sides of like the tool sets that I had been able to build along the way, whether it was graphic design, became really great PowerPoint. I was fairly decent at communicating big ideas and understood complex business processes. And so instead of me really trying to just force feed networking into my life, I decided to really lean into the skills that I liked. Things like art and communication and design and like business growth, things that I was already sort of drawn towards. And I found that not only is there a home in cybersecurity for me, but it's a completely untapped skill set that I got to send Tim Cook to the White House with a letter for the president like 2.5 months ago. That's nuts. So like being able to do stuff like that, I think is awesome. And I think that you get to do that because you you allow yourself to sort of naturally be what you're good at. So I guess like my first pointer would be, if you're naturally drawn towards trying to like fight crime, there's ways to do that. If you're naturally drawn towards public speaking, there's ways to do that. So find the thing that you want to spend time doing and pursue it. The second thing I would say is that there is Brian mentioned this, there's a huge gap in talent. I was talking to the head of security for Netflix, and Netflix has a really sophisticated security team. One of, if not the best in the world at some of the things that they do. And what he said just before he retired was, look, I have all of these projects that need to get done, security projects that need to get done. And I know how to do it, and I know what the jobs are, and I know what the risk is. They're totally scoped out. I just can't find the people to fill the roles. And it's not that he didn't have the budget to hire those people. He had effectively an infinite budget. It's that the people didn't exist. That there wasn't enough sort of expertise for modern security frameworks or modern applications or some of the sort of emerging application frameworks that were going to meet the needs that he had. So his sort of plea to me was like, do something on the training side to make this like a more robust economy of people so that I can hire those folks. And so like, if you get into this market and you become a cybersecurity like novice, there's a home for you, and it's a home that will scale your career up into making a fortune. There are a lot of security engineers that make 7 figures easily. And then the last piece of it, I'll say, is that there are some really cool programs. Like I found the EBV and IVMF because I was trying to make that transition. I was debating starting my own company, and I wanted to spend a little bit more time digging into some of the skills that I knew I was weak in. And that was just like one channel. I looked at a ton of veterans programs, and there's a lot out there. So whether that's, working directly with the VA or like a University of Syracuse type program, take advantage of them, and you'll meet great people along the way. That I still connect with the IVMF folks. In fact, I've got a call later today with a fellow alum on a project that I'm working on. So like, you're not in it alone. And yeah, I guess I would extend myself in that network. So like, if you have a question or I can be helpful, reach out to me, because I know it's not always easy to like find your way through some of the bureaucracy of just, climbing into a role that, is foreign to you at the moment. But hopefully that's helpful.
Awesome. Great advice, both from all three of you. And Romeo, you're up.
Yeah, mine wasn't that clear cut for me. I didn't start out in IT. I was a music education major. And at some point, I knew that music wasn't going to really pay the bills for me and cut it. So I went into the Air Force. But kind of funny how I went in. I said, I need to go the day after Valentine's Day, because I was going to break up with my girlfriend at the time. Or I'm not going to go if I cannot get a job in IT and cybersecurity. So got that job. And what I would say to you is you do have to immerse yourself in this field, start reading different things, podcasts. You have to be involved and get yourself in this environment. Stacey did talk about something that's important though, foundational things. There are certain things that you have to establish as a foundation to make sure that you can build off of for cybersecurity. The other thing I would talk about shortly is resources. Josh did mention this, IVMF as a resource, right? Fed VTE as a resource, multiple places that are resources. I'm about to put something in the window here. If you are working as a contractor or something like that, from Microsoft, they have the ability to offer you free exams, attend different sessions, things like that. So I would say you just have to immerse yourself in these types of things so you can find these resources, get some training. And it's not always about a degree either, because there are multiple ways to be involved and get into this field. Interesting enough, there is one of my students from San Diego State on this call. Amazing. And you do have to keep yourself involved in these types of things. So I hope that helps out. Also, as Josh said, I'm a resource. So if you have any questions, if you just want to throw something out, hey, please let me know. I'm here to help.
All right. Now, you know what? We actually kind of ran over and answered, I think, based off all your answers, my question 2. So I'm actually going to skip over question 2 that we preset, because it looks like all of you had addressed that in some way, shape, or form. Let's see here. So number 3, and then we're going to roll into the Q&As, that because we're having a number of questions come in, and we got some questions that were preset. But number 3 was, what roles do you see IT and specifically cybersecurity playing in our lives personally, professionally, and specifically for any of our webinar participants who are that own or are starting up their business? So this is really focusing on our entrepreneurial participants. We talked about the personal piece, but let's talk a little bit about from a business perspective, where it's the ecosystem of how you need to take care of your business, or if you're a startup, or where should you be focusing some of your energy to help protect that business. We're going to start in the middle this time, since I started on both ends. So let's go with, we're going to go Josh, Stacey, and then our end caps of Robert. I'm sorry, Romeo, and then Robert. So I'm sorry, Bob. So Josh, Stacey, Bob, and Romeo.
All right, I was hoping to cheat on this one, so
I'm mixing it up.
Yeah, what role? Sorry, I'm reading the question to refresh myself. What role do we see cybersecurity playing in all of our lives, personally, professionally, and specifically for any? Okay, so I would say there's no avoiding the reality that security is, like, cybersecurity is a sort of a part of our lives, I think, on into the future, unless something like dramatic happens. What I've noticed on the security tools, I guess this may be for the entrepreneurs who are thinking about launching a cybersecurity startup or talking to like venture capitalists or raising funds. There is certainly a lot of interest in investing in security startups. I'm lucky enough to work with a couple of venture funds now that I think in Q1 they were investing an average of seven startups a day that were around Web3 security. So that's a very sort of specific, narrow lane, but that's a lot of investment at a time when most companies are assuming like that we're sort of jumping off a cliff of a downturn. So there's a lot of money that's going to go towards security. So like if you're entrepreneurial minded and you have an idea for a security company, I would say the best thing you could possibly do is start to rally together a team and explore that idea and see if it actually has legs, and if it does, and pursue it. In terms of like what role cybersecurity is going to take in our lives more personally, I think that the way that I'm seeing security tooling evolve over time is there's a consolidation of security tools. Big players like Microsoft seem to be sort of hoovering up the market. A lot of security vendors see Microsoft as like a sort of an impending threat to them. So you're going to see the big players, the Microsofts, the Amazons of the world, as I think sort of a central point of security in a lot of ways for administrative reasons, and then just acquiring existing tech. But then that tech itself seems to be really prioritizing business acceleration and business momentum. So I'm seeing a lot more security tools that are focused on ease of use, user integration, and being somewhat transparent to the user, so that the security tools that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, like Bob mentioned, MFA. I work with CEO of an MFA company called Yubico, and that's a hard security token that like plugs into your device, and they're constantly looking for ways to make MFA transparent to you, so you don't even realize that you've sort of gone through this multi-factor authentication, so that everything happens in a way that doesn't interrupt your daily flow. So I think the sort of the net of it is security tools are going to be much more pervasive. They're going to be a much more sort of integrated part of your life. Security threats, unfortunately, are also going to be a much more pervasive and integrated part of your life. I think your level of skepticism and diligence on any activities that you've got are going to get increasingly harder. Hopefully the tools can keep up with that. And then I think the landscape has a lot of growth in front of it. So it's really hard to know like how some of these big moves are going to affect us. There's a couple of major moves on supply chain security that seem to be a pretty significant risk and threat for most CISOs that I talk to. Nation state security seems to be like the Wild West at this point. So I think there's ample opportunity if you want to be involved in solving some of those problems, and in whatever form that takes. And then just know there's a lot of people trying to solve those problems. If you're just sort of like a concerned human being that wants to stay safe, there's teams of people out there working to sort of resolve some of the issues, but nothing's settled yet. I think there's still a lot of ground to cover.
Okay, I think that means I'm up now. So I am going to actually throw out some examples. We have digital license plates at this point. There are several states where there are cars that have tablets that have replaced their license plates. We have states that have digital driver's licenses, no more little cards you put in your wallet, because people are starting not to actually carry a wallet. So we are seeing these very foundational changes. One of the threat intelligence teams that I've heard some really great presentations from is from Levi Strauss, the jeans company. They are jeans, and yet they have an amazing cybersecurity program because there's a lot of intellectual property there. There's information, personally identifiable information in their databases that they have to protect, and so on. So cyber's everywhere. There is no such thing as being off-grid, because even if you don't connect to the internet, other people like your doctor and your town and others have your information on the internet. So I would really say that regardless of where you want to end up or what you want to be, cyber is going to be a major role. The one other example I would give is that personally identifiable information. 20 years ago, when I started my career, we had nothing in there about things like email addresses and IP addresses. But today, email addresses and IP addresses are PII. We have to protect those because that's how far we have come. So it's just a broad range of opportunity of different roles that we are going to see. And like everybody has said, it's just going to get broader, because if we're looking at digital license plates, I don't know what's coming next, but I'm sure it'll be pretty interesting.
All right. And I think we're going to Romeo next, and then Robert or Bob.
Sorry, I didn't know it was me. That's my fault. Yes, so I love this question, Brian, because if you think about that piece, cybersecurity from personal, professional, and a small business perspective, if I'm an attacker, I don't really care about any of those. All of them are the same to me, as long as I can find out information on you in either one of those and then try to exploit them across. It's better if I try to target you at work, because maybe you'll think it's legit and you might click on something at work versus personal. But if you think about it from all three of those, you do have to be vigilant on all three fronts, because if you do click on something at work, that could impact your personal life. If you click on something in your personal life, that could impact, for me, my small business. So all of those things sometimes begin to bleed together. So you have to be vigilant across all fronts. That's what we discussed earlier, having those conversations at home, being personally vigilant. Second, at my business, being professionally vigilant with my employees, some sort of security awareness, things that we're having a regular conversation. And then from a small business perspective, we need to maintain a certain type of stance, because as Stacy mentioned earlier, yeah, you could try to stay off the grid, but people that we work with are still going to be on the internet. So at some point, your information may be out there. So it's definitely difficult, but I would say you have to take all three into consideration. I hope that helps to answer and be kind of concise on that, because I know the time.
That's great. And Bob, to you.
So yeah, I could go off on a million tangents and talk for about an hour, but on just this subject. But
A couple minutes left, so.
all right, I'll try and limit it to a couple minutes. Look, cybercrime is crime. You know, when I was back in my FBI days, they told the story about how in the the early part of the 20th century, the FBI had it's broken up into squads. They have the bank robbery squad and the fraud squad and everything. But in the early 20th century, they had telephone squads that dealt with crimes involving telephones. Now, they have long since disbanded telephone squads, but I think we're getting to the point where a cyber squad in a law enforcement community is kind of analogous to a telephone squad. They're it's used in everything. Now, the FBI still has experts in telephone technology that know the details of how phone switches work and everything, and they get brought in on special cases. And I think you're seeing that that's how law enforcement is going. If there's some specific technical piece, the cyber squads come in and they work on the very difficult things like the intrusions and figure out where it has happened and track it. But by and large, everyone needs to be smarter about cybercrime, because it's everywhere. It's getting more entrenched in your life. And so from a law enforcement perspective, they're seeing that. I know from my past career, and I see it. And the more I get involved in this, the more I see that cybercrime is just crime. The stuff that I saw fraudsters doing on a telephone, they're just doing on email and chat and instant messaging and so on and so forth, and social media. But it's the same stuff. So, in some respects, it's extremely complicated. In some respects, it's extremely the same. It's been around for 1,000 years. It's just taken a different form. But, do those things, those four things that we talked about, use multi-factor authentication, make sure you have your automatic updates going, be aware of phishing, those kind of things, guard your mobile devices. If you do those things, it'll take care of about 80% of the problem. So I don't know if I need to stretch a little bit more.
I've got what I'm going to hit in. We're down to like our last 10 minutes. So
Okay.
what I'm going to try to do, we've actually hit a number of the questions that folks brought in, but there are a couple I do want to hit that kind of relate to both the business and technical side. So we did have some questions, and I'm gonna throw a link in there about the CMMC. So the cyber maturity model that DoD. So we all got our history, and back in my uniform days when I was on the Joint Staff, I was in the Deputy Director of Anti-Terrorism, Homeland Defense, and we did a big study looking at the Defense Industrial Base, and that was when cyber crimes, both criminal and quite honestly mostly nation states, we're looking at ways to disrupt our supply chain. So that's all come to fruition now, where DoD is now creating a set of standards that will be fully in effect by 2025 for anybody that has a contract on the supply side or within a defense industrial base, to make sure that their systems are at various levels, depending on how important or integrated or complex what they're supplying to DoD is. It is at a set level of protection. So I'll take input from our SMEs, but I did add the CMMC website in there. They run a monthly town meeting. I kind of relate it to it is a plane that's being built while it's flying. So the bottom line is there's lots of moving parts there. They're standing up the assessors. They're standing up with the standards are there, but the system is going to be in place by 2025. The bottom line is, if you're a business owner and you want to do business with the DoD and the federal government at that level, you're going to have your infrastructure looked at for a set of standards by a third-party auditor to make sure that your data is as protected as possible to help mitigate any risk to our defense industrial base from both criminal and from foreign nation states. So I'm going to open it up to any of the four guests if there's anything that you want to add on top of that, if I missed anything. But it's that was a question that we did have come in. Did any of you have anything you wanted to add as far as your background or understanding of the CMMC? All right.
I don't have anything. Oh, go ahead.
Good. No, good.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I don't have anything specific on the CMMC. I think like what you just described, though, of this constantly evolving threat landscape, and then sort of piggybacking off what Bob said before, these are old tactics made new, and so in a lot of cases, it's just about vigilance and sort of staying ahead of where some of those attack surfaces are. I've seen some super sophisticated attacks through call centers, which you wouldn't expect. You think of that as sort of like a dead technology or something, like when you call to reset a password or whatever, and attackers wiping millions out of people's accounts in like 2 days worth of work. So there's a lot that still happens just through charm and persuasion and getting a little bit of information off your public profiles and using that to sort of leverage against you. So those are all areas that I find fascinating. There's a lot of psychology behind a lot of these attacks now, and it seems like that landscape's only going to get more robust.
I'll add to that a little bit. I see in the chat, Jason had a question about, is CMMC going to replace FedRAMP or add to it? So for FedRAMP, you would need an ATO, right? For CMMC, that's more of an audit, third-party audit that's going to audit your business versus having an ATO. Maybe in the future, possibly, I'm thinking, I don't know if this is going to happen, but maybe there could be some sort of reciprocity, right? Where if you have this maturity level, or you have a FedRAMP ATO, maybe you could be, there's some sort of reciprocity between level 3 or something like that. I can't say it's going to happen, but it's likely going to add to it, not necessarily replace it, because there's always going to be that ATO piece that the government's going to need from a FedRAMP perspective. All
right. So it looks like we've got about 6 minutes left. I'm gonna throw a couple of easy questions at you and then close things out. Again, for everyone that may not have tuned in at the beginning, this is not going to be the last of our series. I mentioned at the beginning, as many of you know, October is Cybersecurity Month, and just as a reminder, we're 6 months out, so this was kind of our prep for Cybersecurity Month. We wanted to get it started and get these relationships going, and we're going to look at setting something up again for October. But I'm going to throw out 2 or 3 quick questions to get us in these last 3 or 4 minutes, and then we're going to close things out, because I know we got a hard stop at 2 o'clock or 1400 for us old military folks that still knew how to add 12 hours to the second half of the day. So, all right. So I kind of know where this one question is coming from, but so the one question for our subject matter experts: are permanently deleted emails, permanently deleted emails, are they really permanently deleted? I'll leave that open to everyone.
I think we're all, go ahead, Bob.
Stacy, I was going to say maybe and turn it over to you.
I would say no, and I see others shaking heads. It depends. It's a little more complex. It depends on your operating system, your email provider, your email software, the country you live in. There's all kinds of factors, but the reality is, if someone wants to get the emails that you typed last month, and it's somebody like the NSA or the Chinese government, they're probably going to be able to get at them.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say is, like, there's intention behind that question. I would say the best thing you can do is just assume that anything you do digitally is a potentially vulnerable surface to extract. And you may think that it's of no value or meaningless, but there's a lot of information that you can piece together, and everything's sort of a piece of a puzzle. Assume that anything you do digitally is permanent. Even if you delete it, even if you did it on your friend's computer or whatever, if you take that mindset, then you're always going to find yourself in a better position defensively.
Yeah. What they all said, in addition to the goal, is so that I have your email. So if you delete it, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care anyway. That's the whole goal. So you can delete it, but I have it. So.
Yeah.
Yep. So so that was one of the softball ones that came out. Let's see what we got left. We got 3 minutes. All right, last question, and I'll just remind all of our participants, if you had sent a question and we didn't answer it, we will get to those and get back to you. We'll get those to our panelists for any input. But let's see, the last one. This one's a little more. I'm gonna ask one of the little more. Now let's go with the HIPAA related one. What are the criteria for HIPAA compliance related to cybersecurity? So HIPAA and cybersecurity, how do they relate?
I don't have a good answer on this. I'm not a HIPAA expert, so I'll let this over to Stacy.
So I'm not a HIPAA expert either, but I'm throwing in the chat the website that actually gives you the answer to that question. What I would say is, basically, HIPAA, for everything that it protects, all that information is electronic. So it's tying right into cybersecurity. Easy example is that if you have ransomware and you've got PHI that's compromised by that ransomware and encrypted, unless you can show it was encrypted by your company first before the ransomware got at it, you have a HIPAA violation right there, even if they didn't pull it off your system. So the two are completely intertwined.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Completely agree with you, Stacy, around that piece. A lot of it does stem with establishing those best practices from either NIST or the CIS controls. So if you kind of look at those as a guideline on how you want to protect your systems, great way to go.
With
the
that
only
being,
thing I'll say
go ahead,
is,
Josh. I just want to get
real
go ahead.
HIPAA doesn't necessarily protect your data from a data breach. The Scripps data breach just a few months ago sort of illustrates that. So looking at HIPAA as sort of a protection framework is more, I think, is your patient rights. It has less to do with like your actual data protection. Just as just a quick side note.
All right. With that being said, I'm gonna wrap things up. Oh, well, I just got told won't get cut off, so that's great. But I do want to thank everyone that joined us today. Our guests, Bob, Stacy, Josh, and Romeo for all your subject matter expert input today. I think the greatest thing, as you said today, is it's an opportunity to build your network. As Josh said, I'm one of those guys that I grew up as a digital analog baby. I grew up learning everything analog as I grew up through the military and transitioned everything from as we said back then, acetate and markers to digital screens that has everything being tracked digitally, right? So I know enough smart people to go to when I need to ask questions, and I feel like I just added a bunch of great smart folks to my network today, and hopefully everyone that joined us feels the same. So I'd like to thank each of you for your time today. I think this was a great webinar. Really look forward to continuing another conversation here as we go into October for Cybersecurity Month. And Ashley, I'm actually gonna, if you want, even though I was kind of the host, if you want to close out from the alumni perspective, or Elvis, if you got anything to add, I would like to hand it over to you for any closing comments, please.
Sure. Yeah, we'll just close out just saying thank you, reiterating the thanks for our speakers and our attendees joining us today. We did record the session, so anyone that registered, we know some people can't take time out of their workday, but still are very interested in the discussion. So we send that out to all of our registrants, and we do post it on our YouTube page. So we'll share that in a follow-up email, the link to the resources from the Fight Cybercrime website as well. So just stay in touch with us, and if you have any follow-up questions, we'll make sure to get those answered. But thanks everyone for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next VetNet. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.